is March 25th, 2025, and the Trump administration apparently wants you to think that they are dumb enough to add the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to a group chat where top U.S. officials are, just sitting around discussing plans for the U.S. to bomb Yemen and complaining about having to bail out Europe, when the reality is that these strikes on Yemen have nothing to do with Europe and everything to do with Israel. The timing, the wording, there's a lot in here that I want to get into and to break down, because either this was a carefully planned stunt, which it seems like it was, or we just are dealing with the dumbest administration in US history that loves to throw out emojis and pays no attention to who is a part of their group chat. We are going to be getting into all of that and more here in today's video. But before we do, just a quick reminder here that your support makes my work possible. So if anything in this video resonates with you, you can always sign up and support my work as a monthly paid subscriber over on my page on Substack or on Patreon. You can also send a one-time donation on my page on Buy Me a Coffee, and I will leave all of the information in the description box below. All right, now let's get into the chaos that erupted on Monday. Again, I will get back to the timing here, but the timing of it all, I do not think was an accident, because Monday was when you had the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, publish an article in which he revealed that he received a connection request from National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on the messaging app Signal 2 weeks ago, and after accepting it, he was added into a group chat named Houthi PC Small Group, where top U.S. administration officials were discussing plans for the U.S. to bomb Yemen, and they were sharing those plans hours in advance. Now, this is one of those stories that kind of blew up on Monday. Everyone is talking about it today, and if you pay attention to the mainstream media coverage of this, they are presenting it from a purely national security angle, right? They're like, oh, there was highly sensitive information. They're trying to claim that it was classified information. I have not seen any evidence of that, but at the very least, highly sensitive information that was being discussed apparently by Trump administration officials. It seems like it's pretty legit from everything that we've seen in this group chat. And there just happened to be a random journalist who got added to the chat, who conveniently then removed himself from the chat, I should add, after he took a bunch of screenshots. And then he waited 2 weeks in order to then publish the story, right? Put it out there to the world and to let them know what happened. And as part of those messages, we also found out that Vice President JD Vance did not agree with the decision to strike Yemen. And that is an interesting element to it. I know that the media is trying to blow it up as some sort of break between Trump and Vance, right? They're normally on the same page, and this is evidence that they're not. I do not think that that is necessarily the case. I do think Vance makes a good point, but not really for the reasons that he may think that he's making that point. And it's actually the comments from JD Vance that really stand out the most to me in terms of the argument for the fact that this was not just some accident. I mean, first of all, Jeffrey Goldberg is not just some random journalist, and we'll get into why. But on top of that, JD Vance and his argument that the U.S. is somehow going to bomb Yemen in order to bail out Europe makes no sense at all, unless, of course, Europe is a code word for Israel. So let's get into what he had to say in this chat. On the morning of Friday, March 14th, JD Vance wrote, quote, "Team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez Canal. 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this is, as POTUS said, to send a message." And Vance is correct there with his comment, at least, that the American people are not going to understand why this is necessary, because they voted, when they voted for Donald Trump, for the guy who was promising peace, promising an end to the endless wars, peace in the Middle East, you name it, it was a Trump campaign slogan. And so because of that, when they suddenly hear that the US under Trump is now bombing Yemen, doing the exact same thing that the Biden administration did, yeah, they're going to have some questions and rightfully so. When you look at Vance's reasoning for this, he seems to be claiming that, oh, if the US were going to bomb Yemen, then that would be because we were concerned about Yemen putting a blockade on shipping through the Red Sea, which then goes to the Suez Canal, which then, of course, goes up to Europe. So he's saying, hey, this blockade would be much more of a problem for Europe, yet we're being the ones who are now being forced to take action against Yemen to, I guess, stop this blockade, although I don't think that that's what the US is actually doing. But he then went on to say this. He said, I am not sure the president is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I am willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but there is a strong argument for delaying a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. So Vance is looking at this from the logical angle of what are the American people going to think? If the US bombs Yemen, if shipping is affected, if Yemen doubles down on that blockade and now all of a sudden is actually targeting US and European linked ships, oh, well, then that could send oil prices skyrocketing. Oh, and then that harms the US, and it especially harms the American people who are now looking at someone like Donald Trump and going, wait a second, you promised us low gas prices. You promised us that the prices at the grocery store would come down, that we would not have to deal with paying, $12 for a dozen eggs, that we would not have to be in this ridiculous position of paying all of these very high prices. And yet here you are doing exactly what Joe Biden did and exactly what we all just voted against. But of course, if you've been paying attention to the ongoing tensions in the Middle East, you would know that Yemen's blockade is not really directed at Europe. Not right now, it's not. We have to go back and remember that in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks in 2023, which Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is apparently now calling a Holocaust, even though the IDF killed its own civilians, which I guess is probably an inconvenient truth that he's not ready to talk about. But that is a different rant for a different day. In the aftermath of the October 7th attacks, Israel put a full blockade on the Gaza Strip as they declared that they were going to. And then they started on with their genocidal bombardment, which has been ongoing almost constantly ever since, with the exception of a couple of ceasefires. So when Israel did that, you had the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, as they are officially called in Yemen. They looked at the situation and they said, okay, what can we do? Oh, we can target Israel-linked ships in the Red Sea, right? They're crossing over to Israel, not going all the way to Europe, obviously, as the US seems to think that this blockade, that it's really about. No, they found something tangible that they could do. They implemented that blockade. And then when the US under Joe Biden and the UK led a bombing spree against Yemen, then Yemen said, okay, fine. We'll also target US linked ships and UK linked ships. So that's what they did. However, we should also note that when it came to the ceasefire that was implemented back in January, what did Yemen do? They said, hey, if you want to have a ceasefire, if you want to stop bombing Gaza and you want to allow humanitarian aid back into the Gaza Strip, guess what? We're going to stop our blockade on Israel-linked ships. And that's exactly what they did. But when Israel then decided that it was done with the ceasefire, as we knew that they were going to be after phase one, then Israel reinstated a blockade on humanitarian aid going into Gaza, and Ansar Allah in Yemen said, you know what, we think we're going to reinstate our blockade on Israel-linked ships in the Red Sea because you did not hold up your end of the bargain. Therefore, we're going to go back to exactly what we were doing before. And in a statement, the spokesman for Ansar Allah said that any Israeli ship attempting to break this blockade will be targeted in the declared operational area. This blockade will continue until the crossings to the Gaza Strip are reopened and humanitarian aid, including food and medicine, is allowed to enter. So again, this is about Israel. This has nothing to do with Europe. This is about the US intervening on behalf of Israel. The US bombing Yemen because of Israel. And it literally is about, and that's the thing that I hate that the Trump administration is currently trying to do. They're trying to turn this into, oh, the Houthis are bad, therefore we must bomb them. Well, the Houthis are not threatening the United States. No, they're targeting Israel-linked ships in a blockade imposed on the Red Sea because Israel has a blockade imposed on the Palestinian people. Those are points that the Trump administration flat out refuses to acknowledge. So either JD Vance is being fed the wrong information, and he genuinely does think that the US bombing Yemen is a way for the US to step up and to try to protect Europe and the trade going through the Suez Canal, or he is just reciting his lines on what is essentially a script that is then going to be leaked to the world. Because then we hear from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who says, VP, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out: economy, Ukraine peace, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funded. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, he says, and yet they're so important that the Trump administration feels the need to bomb them, to essentially declare war on them, and to then try to tie it to Iran in the aftermath, as we've seen Trump attempt to do with his post on Truth Social. But there is one thing that Hegseth says that is spot on, which is that Biden failed. The Biden administration bombed Yemen thinking it was going to do something, thinking it was going to end Ansar Allah's blockade on Israel and US and UK linked ships in the Red Sea. And guess what? It didn't. It was not successful. And what the Trump administration should have done was that they should have learned from that. Instead, they think that, oh, we're just going to bomb Yemen harder, right? The poorest country in the Middle East, which has already been bombed by the US and Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries in their coalition for years. So much so that it created the world's worst humanitarian crisis at the time. And that was just a few years ago. And now, not only is Ansar Allah still there and still standing strong, but the US looks ridiculous once again when they are back to bombing Yemen, thinking that it's going to change something. And now on top of it, lying about it and acting like they're just doing this for their friends in Europe. Like, how stupid do they think that we are? Hegseth then goes on to say that waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. We are prepared to execute, and I had final go or no go vote. I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as two things. One, restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and two, reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered. If this leaks, okay, that's just funny now because the defense secretary is acting like he's in this chat concerned that the information that they're talking about is going to leak, as if he doesn't know that there just happens to be the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic in this chat. Like, why don't you check the people that are a part of your own chat? I know there's over a dozen of them in this chat group, but you should be aware of who all is in the chat that you're currently texting, especially if you're texting them about US plans to bomb Yemen and you're claiming that you're concerned about the conversation leaking. Also, the part that he mentions there, if the Gaza ceasefire falls apart, as if to say that the US did not know, which I know that they did know, that Israel was going to break the ceasefire, was going to begin bombing Gaza once again. So it's very interesting the wording that these Trump administration officials choose to use here versus what we actually know that they know, or that we would at least, at the very least, assume that they know. We also get the age-old tradition here in the US of officials acting as though we really care about freedom of navigation, right? We are ramping up the US military presence in the South China Sea for freedom of navigation. That's why we are doing this, not because we're concerned, in this case with the Red Sea, not because we're concerned about the fact that Yemen is targeting Israel-linked ships, and Israel has clearly complained about that enough. And on top of that, Israel has also highlighted the fact that the Biden administration failed to stop Yemen. Therefore, the Trump administration feels the need to bomb Yemen harder as if they are actually going to accomplish something. It's never about freedom of navigation. The chat then goes on from there, with Hegseth apparently laying out the exact plans for the US strikes on Yemen. Again, never checking who all is in this chat, or maybe if it includes anyone it's not supposed to. Oh, and then it goes on from there to where the Trump administration officials are sending each other ridiculous emojis and congratulating each other on what amounts to bombing and killing more innocent civilians in the poorest country in the Middle East. Okay, so we've talked about what was said and kind of the context of some of these comments. Now I want to talk about the timing and the journalist they chose, or who was accidentally placed in this group chat, Jeffrey Goldberg. Because yes, he is the editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, but that's not all. As journalist Alan MacLeod pointed out on X, Goldberg actually dropped out of an Ivy League university to volunteer to be an IDF prison guard during the first Palestinian Intifada. And in his memoirs, Goldberg revealed that he helped cover up serious prisoner abuse. So this is not just your run-of-the-mill reporter who just happened to get placed into this chat. Oh no, this is a guy who not only is sympathetic to Israel, he literally volunteered for the IDF and was a former IDF prison guard. It does not get more blatant than that in terms of, red flags around this situation that make you wonder if it wasn't just an accident. And when it comes to cover-ups, distractions, and things that involve Israel, we also need to talk about the timing of this article. Because also on Monday, Israel murdered Palestinian journalist Mohammed Mansour in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza by bombing his apartment. They then murdered Hossam Shabat in Jabalia in northern Gaza by bombing his car. That brings the number of journalists that Israel has targeted and killed in the Gaza Strip in the last nearly 18 months up to 208. Over 200 journalists killed, targeted, murdered by Israel. And in the case of Shabat, he literally had a statement written for a moment like this. He knew that his life could be taken at any moment. And so after he was murdered, his team released a statement, and I want to take a moment to read that now. It says, "If you're reading this, it means I have been killed, most likely targeted by the Israeli occupation forces. When this all began, I was only 21 years old, a college student with dreams like anyone else. For the past 18 months, I have dedicated every moment of my life to my people. I documented the horrors in northern Gaza minute by minute, determined to show the world the truth they tried to bury. I slept on pavements, in schools, in tents, anywhere I could. Each day was a battle for survival. I endured hunger for months, yet I never left my people's side. By God, I fulfilled my duty as a journalist. I risked everything to report the truth, and now I am finally at rest. Something I haven't known in the past 18 months. I did all of this because I believe in the Palestinian cause. I believe this land is ours, and it has been the highest honor of my life to die defending it and serving its people. I ask you now, do not stop speaking about Gaza. Do not let the world look away. Keep fighting, keep telling our stories until Palestine is free. For the last time, Hossam Shabat from northern Gaza." And to know how young this guy was, to know everything that he went through and how hard that he fought, and the fact that he was directly targeted by Israel, his killing was funded by the US government, right? By my government in my country. And it breaks my heart in a way that I can't describe, because everything that I do here is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, right? I'm sitting here, I'm breaking down the latest news for you. I am covering these stories that I'm passionate about that I hope that you learn more about. And it pales in comparison to the journalists that are on the ground in a place like the Gaza Strip, where you had two journalists, right? Their lives were on the line. They were murdered by Israel. The IDF has come out since then and bragged about it, claiming, oh, he was a part of Hamas and therefore we killed him. He was eliminated. When you're talking about a 22-year-old kid being murdered, and it is just so sickening to watch, and to know that he had the foresight to make a statement like that, to encourage the public to keep talking about Gaza, to keep talking about the importance of the Palestinian people and the fight that they are fighting right now for their land. So many of us have no concept of what they are going through, right? So many people would look at this and just go, why would you fight? Why would you give your life when you could just become a refugee to a different country? And then maybe you would live a long life there compared to the suffering that you would go through in Gaza. We have no idea what the Palestinian people are going through and how hard they are fighting day in and day out and have been for decades now. And it's stories like this that remind me of how important it is to continue to amplify their voices, to continue speaking out about this. Because all of this stuff about the Atlantic and the Trump administration apparently not knowing how to run a group chat, allegedly, all of that is just fluff at the end of the day. When you look at the stories that really matter, when you look at what is happening behind the scenes, and that's why I wanted to do this video in this way, to point out the cover up of it all, right? The timing of it all, the fact that the Trump administration is playing this ridiculous game, it appears, where they are doing this song and dance of, oh, we're going to, have this group chat that leaks where we talk about, defending Europe and bombing Yemen and freedom of navigation. It's like none of that is about any of that. All of it is about defending and covering up for Israel. That's something that the US government is actively doing publicly, politically, and militarily. They are actively complicit in a genocide right now, and that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also check out Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.